Good evening, good evening. Tahis Love here. I'm doing the Saturday Sanity Show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Tonight, I want to just uh, talk to you about um, PTSD. June is National PTSD Month, Awareness Month, and um, I just want to bring some awareness, some information, and shed some light on what PTSD is. Now, normally, when we um, think of PTSD, uh, we originally think about uh, a condition that uh, military personnel go through or are affected by. Um, but that's only one type of PTSD. There are quite a few types, and uh, more more types are coming about as things traumatic situations occur. Okay, and so I just wanted to share with you some things about PTSD. Now, what exactly is PTSD? PTSD stands for post traumatic stress, uh, post traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Yeah. And what that is it's a condition. It's a condition that um, occurs to a person usually after a traumatic event. Um, Post traumatic stress disorder. Um, it can happen to anyone at any time. It's not bound by age. You can never be uh, too old um, to um, come down with this disorder. Um, you can be as young as a, a small child, um, as long as you have the ability to remember. Um, you can be affected with uh, PTSD. Now, post-traumatic stress disorder, what it is exactly, it's a it's a condition. It is a disorder. Um, it's a mental disorder, and it's it's not it's not permanent, and it is treatable. Okay. Now, post traumatic stress disorder, I just want to go over exactly um, what it is. I had quite a few different definitions for it. And because it is a mental disorder, some of the definitions can get really, really technical and sound confusing. Okay. And so I found one um, explanation of of the condition that I found was, you know, easier to understand. Um, because the whole point of this video is to bring awareness. And I know that I'm talking to um, people who are not uh, psychologically trained and all of that. Um, and so I wanted you to be able to understand as well. Okay. Now, uh, the what post-traumatic stress disorder is. It is a condition. It's a mental condition, um, even psychological condition, um, that usually occurs right after there has been a traumatic event. Traumatic event could be something as um, common as a car accident, um, or it can be as complex as um, a natural disaster. Okay, um, what I'm what I want to get across to you is that PTSD uh, can occur. One can develop PTSD um, at any time, and anyone can um, wind up with PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. It is a condition that occurs in reaction or as a response to trauma or traumatic event. Okay, so now I wanted to. I had it all. I had it all written down. This really nice, simple um, definition that made perfect English. And I wanted because a post-traumatic stress disorder can occur in children as well. And so it was very important to me as I put together this video to have the information as simplified as I possibly can, so that even parents can, recognize certain things um, that may be occurring in their children. Um, the thing about post traumatic stress disorder is that it is a reaction, it's a response. And the this is a response to a traumatic event or an occurrence. And um, it, things can occur that will trigger the post traumatic stress response, even after the event is over, long past. Um, and so I wanted to, be able to make it clear so that in case you or someone you know may have gone through a, a traumatic event. Um, it could have been in the recent past, or it could have been years ago. But something may have happened recently that triggered a PTSD response. I wanted you to be able to um, recognize that or help someone recognize and identify whatever that traumatic event was. Usually, when we experience a traumatic event, it catches us off guard. Um, and hence, there's trauma where your 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 mind, your body, your spirit even tries to make sense of what has happened and why it happened and what is the best thing you can do about it. So, um, you know, it can happen at any time. I know of I know of a good friend of mine that was um, experienced a traumatic event, physical traumatic event when she was a little girl. At the time, she didn't. Um, she wasn't even aware of the impact of the trauma. She didn't even know she had trauma from that event. It wasn't until after she grew up and uh, the the sounding of the person's voice that had physically traumatized her um, triggered her post-traumatic stress uh, disorder response, and she, just started acting differently and uh, out of her norm shortly after hearing that person's voice um, on a telephone call. And so, you know, it took her a while to put two and two together, but she was able to do that and understand the source of her response. Okay. Now, okay. Um, I've located it here. And what happens with post traumatic stress disorder is that it is it is a response. It's a condition um, and a response to a traumatic event. And it's what happens is that you become uh, you become very emotionally upset and mentally distressed. Okay, you become visibly and uncontrollably distressed and anxious upon uh, uh, something that has that reminds you of the traumatic event, or uh, your mind starts reenacting the traumatic event, or a memory is triggered uh, regarding the traumatic event. And uh, once you once that memory is triggered, um, you begin to become distressed, overly anxious, um, incredibly fearful, overwhelmed, and you can't control it. Um, the post traumatic stress disorder um, response is it's you notice it, you become, it's an overwhelming reaction uh, to something that reminded the person uh, of the traumatic event. Okay, and it's sudden. It could come really suddenly, like out of nowhere. Okay, the person starts exhibiting um, uh, extreme anxiety, um, confusion, um, fear, trembling, um, and they go through this response um, because of something that may have reminded them or uh, uh, triggered that response. Okay. Um, okay. Now there are different, uh, different, like people um wind up with PTSD from different kinds of trauma or traumatic events. Okay. Um, like I stated earlier, um, a lot of military personnel that um, have been involved in combat or um, war, you know, they may have experienced trauma stemming from uh, witnessing or participating in um, extremely um, a violent occurrence, um, like I said, combat, or they might have been, a witness to very disturbing images, such as explosion and um, people dying, uh, things of that nature. And so, um, veterans, military personnel, they, survived that traumatic experience, but they still they come away with the memories, and those memories, their mind uh, will take them back through those memories, and they wind up reliving the traumatic event over and over and over and over again, and it uh, causes them to become really distressed, uh, experiencing anxiety, paranoia, things of that nature. Okay, so uh, military personnel are one group of people that may may experience PTSD. Another um, another group of people that may experience PTSD may be our first responders, people that have to enter into dangerous situations in order to save lives. So, um, police officers, firemen, um, even uh, EMTs, perhaps, may experience um, post traumatic stress disorder. Um, because of the nature of their work, um, they may be exposed to um, situations where there's loss of life, um, immediate danger, and so uh, they come away with uh, memories of the trauma stemming from those events. And so, first responders, um, firemen, police officers, EMTs, that's the next group of people that may be susceptible to post traumatic stress syndrome. Okay. Um, and then another group of people are those uh, survivors of sexual assault. So, um, rape victims, um, victims of um, sex trafficking, um, um, kidnapped victims also, that were sexually assaulted, violated. Um, they too experience uh, PTSD stemming from the traumatic event, being that of sexual violence, sexual assault, rape, things of that nature. Okay, so and then there are um, another group of people that um, experience or are susceptible to PTSD are um, uh, civilian survivors. So, for example, an example of a civilian survivor may be uh, uh, teachers that were at a school when there was a uh, massive school shooting. Uh, these are they're teachers, and you know at the time of a massive school shooting, you know their job uh, uh, came down to trying to protect the children. They are not police officers. They are unarmed. They're not trained in kind of combat. But because of the nature of the traumatic event, uh, a teacher would try to do their best to protect the children in that kind of situation. And, you know, uh, coming out of that situation, having survived, uh, they are civilians and civilian survivors. And they come away from those traumatic situations with those memories still. And so they are uh, susceptible to PTSD. So, teachers in a school shooting um, are an example of civilian survivors. Okay. Um, and so um, these various groups of people that I've mentioned so far, again, it just shows that it could happen to anyone. So an example of a civilian survivor could be, again, with the school shooting, it could be the children. Um, they were in this, in that situation, and you know, they survived, but they have the memories and you know the clear recollection of a traumatic event. Another example of a civilian survivor could be someone that was in a car accident. You know, car accidents are really, really common, and the memory of the car, seeing the car, you know, smash into you, you know, you survived it, but it was traumatic for you, and you're a civilian. Okay, so that's those are examples of civilian survivors. Okay, and uh, another group of people that are susceptible to maybe susceptible to PTSD is those who have survived COVID, um, who have experienced uh, being ill, with COVID-19, um, they too have experienced a traumatic event, and so many many people who have survived um, COVID. In fact, my stats tell me that uh, 80% of those that survived COVID uh, come away with uh, some form of post traumatic stress syndrome. Um, and they start showing symptoms of that even before they fully recover. Uh, and so, uh, COVID uh, patients and survivors are yet another group of people that are nowadays susceptible to post traumatic stress syndrome. And and so there are those are the groups of people that are susceptible to post traumatic stress syndrome, and the different um, uh, traumatic events uh, that can lead to PTSD. Okay. And so now, what if you had a traumatic event, um, but you didn't realize that it was traumatic for you? Okay. How do you know whether you are experiencing PTSD? Okay. Um, well, there are um, symptoms. PTSD has, a list of symptoms, and depending on what was your traumatic event, the symptoms may vary a little. Okay, that's why I talked about the different groups of people that uh, that are more susceptible to PTSD. So, for example, some of the symptoms of uh, the PTSD experienced by a sexually assaulted uh, survivor is different slightly from that of um, a former military personnel. Okay, and then their PTSD symptoms may show may be different from someone who is a civilian survivor. And so the symptoms, the signs of PTSD uh, vary slightly from person to person, but there are some common symptoms, and I want to share those with you um, so that you can um, readily uh, sort out, if you or someone um, is experiencing PTSD and not be fully aware of it, okay? Some of the common symptoms of PTSD, these are symptoms that all people, regardless of the source of their trauma, experience um, when they are having an episode with post-traumatic stress syndrome. These are the common symptoms. Most people who have PTSD experience these symptoms, regardless of what what was the source of their trauma or traumatic event. Okay. And those symptoms are uh, they have flashbacks of the traumatic event, or flashbacks of images that uh, are related to the traumatic event. Okay. Um, they have, they're constantly thinking about the traumatic event, or uh, images related to the traumatic event. So they spend a lot of time just thinking about it, over and over and over again, remembering uh, things that were related to the traumatic event. They daydream. They could be, so they're distracted. They could be uh, doing. They could be reading, and you know, all of a sudden their mind drifts off to a memory from the traumatic event, and that happens while they're fully awake and alert. Um, they can have uh, nightmares, and so they would experience trouble sleeping at night, or when they do go to sleep, they are awakened and startled, um, because of the dream that they were having, uh, which was connected to the traumatic event. Um, they experience intense distress, intense distress, um, from either uh, something real or something symbolic that reminds them of the traumatic events. Okay. And when I say real or symbolic memory, I mean that they could have a memory that of where they recall something distinct that happened during the traumatic event, or related to the traumatic event, or they can um, uh, see something or look at an image that would symbolically remind them of the traumatic event. So, for instance, PTSD um, uh, victims of 9/11, for example. Um, 9/11 happened on election day. That day was election day. And so um, maybe perhaps every election day, or uh, primary time, uh, people that could be a trigger for um, the PTSD. So when you start talking about voting, or even something as simple as the month of September, you know, nine, the number nine, being that it was, 9/11, those things symbolically um, remind them of that traumatic event. Okay. And so there are another these are common symptoms, okay, that all PTSD um, survivors uh, experience and display. Um, and then they experience and display physical sensations, um, such as uh, vomiting or pain or swelling or shaking, trembling upon the thought, uh, or thoughts related to the traumatic event. Okay, so um, people who are experiencing uh, PTSD, they go through physical symptoms, emotional symptoms, as well as psychological symptoms. Okay, and and that's very common for PTSD um, survivors. Okay, those are the common symptoms. Now, depending on the source of the or the type of traumatic event that the uh, PTSD survivor uh, experience, then they'll have all of those common symptoms, but then they might have a few other symptoms that are distinct and directly related to the nature of the traumatic event. So, for example, someone who is a survivor of sexual assault, they will experience all of those common symptoms of PTSD. You know, the flashbacks, the constant thinking about, ruminating, constant thoughts on the traumatic event. They will experience and display trembling, um, painful sensations, um, physical sensations in different areas of their body. But for example, someone who is um, a sexually assaulted survivor may experience pain in specific places in their body. So, um, whereas a a military former military personnel may not feel they may feel pain sensations of pain in their body, but it might be in a different area. They might experience more headaches, um, maybe eye strain, things of that nature, because of um, the traumatic event and the nature of the traumatic event that they survived. Um, Someone else, a civilian survivor of a school mass shooting, they may uh, they may experience pain just like everyone else, but they may experience uh, hearing certain sounds like loud noises, like, every loud noise may sound like a gunshot to them. So, and they may experience pain in their ears, um, or they can't really deal with any loud, sudden noises, um, similar to military personnel, um, who I had an uncle who was a Marine during the Vietnam War, and he before he uh, was able to, he was supposed to get on the plane and fly over to Vietnam, and he was running a little late to catch the plane, and he had come out of the airport and was running to board the plane, and the plane door, where they were boarding, allowing the soldiers to board the plane. Um, they had just moved the step ladder thing and closed the door. So he couldn't. He missed the plane. He was still running to the plane, and he saw that, and so he knew, okay, I missed the plane. Uh, the plane gets ready to take off, and he's still there, uh, watching and running to towards the plane when he saw the plane start to move, to pull off. The plane moved and started to pull off and go down whatever the runway was, and it started to lift. And just as it started to lift, the plane exploded. And my uncle saw the entire thing, saw the plane explode, and he knew that his whole platoon, uh, everybody that was on that plane had died. And he would have been dead also had he arrived to board the plane on time. And he he from that day on, he could not take loud loud exploding noises. 4th of July was a terrible time of the year for him. He really suffered, um, you know, because of the fireworks that would go off, and they would sound like, explosions to him. And so whenever 4th of July um, holiday happened, he would make sure he would come home, he would go in his room, he would turn the TV up in his room very, very loud and watch a comedy or something like that, so that uh, the sound of the laughter would drown out the sound of the fireworks going off, um, so that it wouldn't, you know, upset him and everything. But I remember that distinctly about my uncle. Um, he suffered with PTSD um, from that, for many years after that. Okay, so I was talking about the different types, and then I talked about the common symptoms and how um, everyone or most people with PTSD experiences the common symptoms, but then they also experience uh, additional symptoms that are directly related to uh, the type of trauma that they experienced. Okay, so then I'm trying to make sure I have everything. Okay, so now that we are aware of the symptoms of PTSD, um, how do you know if you have it? Okay. How do you know when should you go and get checked? Okay. I went over the symptoms of people that have PTSD. This is some of the things that they experience. But what if, and they know that they have PTSD? What if you're not sure? You might be experiencing some of these things, but not all of them, or um, you're experiencing some of these things, but not with that extreme intensity. Um, when should when should you go and talk to someone, or uh, when should you not? Okay. Um, well, you should go and you should do something. If it's, go and talk to someone, or get evaluated, um, seek help of some sort, because PTSD is very, very much treatable. Very much treatable. There are a whole host of different treatments. Um, you can pick and choose which treatment you like to utilize. You can even utilize combination of treatments. Some people, they have to take various medications to help them uh, regain control of their uh, emotions, and uh, help them to anchor themselves back into the present reality. Other people don't have to take medications. They can um, utilize uh, cognitive behavior therapy, where they would see a therapist like me, where we would uh, talk about what it is that they experienced. Um, I would help you to identify those things that uh, are causing you the anxiety, those things that are causing you the distress, and uh, see how that, you know, relates to the trauma or the traumatic event, and then help you to understand, um, those thoughts that you are having over and over again. You develop uh, certain beliefs that cause you to become fearful, and sitting down and talking with a therapist like me, we would help you to identify those your triggers, and those beliefs that cause you to become overly anxious, distressed, fearful, and help you to navigate through that, and um, uh, just to figure out ways to um, help yourself figure out if those fears, anxieties are warranted, uh, meaning that, are those is that fearful, anxious, distressed reaction, is that the appropriate reaction to certain triggers and everything, and help you to control and regain control over your um, psychological, emotional, and even physical responses to those triggers. So that's cognitive behavioral therapy. Then there is uh, ex- expansive expansive therapy, which um, a therapist would help you face your fears, uh, face the source of your anxiety, and identify it, and then help you move through the fear and the anxiety so that you can regain uh, control of your life and regain some sort of normalcy in your life. Um, that's what expansive therapy. Both expansive therapy and cognitive behavior therapy do not require medication. Okay, uh, but there are um, those are you know different forms of treatment. There are medication that is designed to help people experiencing PTSD, help them cope, manage their emotions, um, and calm them down. Ease their distress and anxiety and paranoia. Okay, and then uh, there's even apps. There are post traumatic stress disorder um, apps uh, available as well, where one who is surviving PTSD, the apps will help them to chart the number of occurrences um, of the PTSD symptoms, also help them to recognize triggers and uh, coach them through um, working through those triggers um, with the apps. The apps um, uh, the you're when you're working with the apps, you're not uh, taking medication like that. The apps on you have the apps on your phone, and it's a way where the person experiencing and struggling with PTSD, it's a way of helping them help themselves. So the apps would be in addition to whatever other therapy uh, you may be utilizing for your full recovery. Okay. So the apps would be in addition to medication therapy, or in addition to cognitive behavior therapy, or in addition to expansive therapy. Okay. So those are the different types of therapy. Um, but when, how do you know when it's time to talk to someone, or when is it time to seek help? Okay. Um, when to, when it's time to seek help, when you have, I mean, after a traumatic event, uh, and you start to feel uh, overwhelmingly anxious or overwhelmingly depressed. Okay, sometimes you feel overwhelmingly anxious and depressed, um, and at simultaneously, and then after feeling overwhelmingly anxious or overwhelmingly depressed, uh, you have no desire to do anything at all. You just shut down. You might be sleeping a lot. You don't want to leave the house. You don't want to do anything. You just want to just be. Um, if you're experiencing that and that's it's going on, you know, uh, for a week, two in a row, um, it's time to talk to somebody. If you are experiencing that right now, it's time to talk to somebody. And you know, you can talk to a family member, and perhaps that family member will um, reach out and find help for you. You can um, talk to a therapist. I even have the telephone number to the uh, National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. That telephone number, you can call it, is 1-800 273 8255. That is 1-800 273 8255. That is the telephone number to the National Center uh, for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. Um, I want to say syndrome. Um, and so you can call that number and they can set you up with and have you evaluated um, or connect you directly with the type of help that you need. Or you can call me at Dunamis Sound Mind Services. You can reach me at 718-576-8110. You can email me at dunamissoundmind@gmail.com. And just reach out to me. I'll be, more than happy to sit down and talk with you, and we can um, assess, whether or not you are experiencing PTSD or something else. Okay. And I can help you. Now, the method of treatment that I would uh, help you with would be the non medication treatments. So I would um, uh, help you through cognitive behavioral therapy because that's the type of therapist that I am, or the expansive therapy, because those are the kinds of things that I do. But um, you know, I would say, you know, go and if it turns out that you are experiencing PTSD, I would recommend that you get evaluated so that you can uh, better determine whether or not you would need uh, treatment with medication. Uh, and I'm a I do not work with uh, medications uh, like that. I am a holistic uh, cognitive behavioral therapist, um, and a uh, holistic health practitioner. And so I would, uh, you know, utilize um, holistic means, um, without chemicals and medication like that. So, but that's my scope, uh, that and of treatment that I utilize. But that's not to say, if you need medication, and pharmaceutical uh, treatment like that. I'm saying that I'm not the one that uh, would be administering that to, because I do not administer medications like that, for treatment, like that. But I could refer you to someone that does, or you can, you know, um, go to someone that does, if that is the type of treatment that you need. Okay. And so, you know, if you have questions or comments, feel free to put it right there in the chat. And I would love to respond to your questions and your comments. If you know of someone, or maybe you yourself, um, find that you may be experiencing post traumatic stress disorder, um, please go and get the help, seek the help, because post traumatic stress disorder is very, very much treatable. And there are a whole host of different treatments that you can utilize to help you live uh, more comfortably with PTSD, and, you know, greatly relieve your symptoms. Okay. I had a stat here. Oh, okay. Um, 8 million people every day experience PTSD and are living with PTSD in the United States. Okay, so if you find that um, you have it, you've been struggling with it, you are not alone, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's nothing to be, you know, to feel any kind of negative way about it. As I stated earlier, PTSD is a um, condition that happens in response to trauma or traumatic event. It's a response. Something traumatic happened to you, and the way you reacted or responded to that trauma, um, it shows up as PTSD. So please, go and, you know, uh, seek help. I'm here to help you, and or your loved one or someone that's close to you. Um, don't just sit there and hope that it's going to go away, because it does not. Okay. And it escalates. The more triggers that occur, um, reminding you of the traumatic event, the more intense the your reaction is to those triggers, and the more intense your PTSD symptoms become. And so and the lower your quality of life goes. So it's better to get on it sooner than later. Oh, I know what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about pandemic PTSD. Um, Pandemic PTSD is PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, stemming from the lingering effects of the pandemic. Okay. Now, uh, all of us have been impacted greatly by this pandemic. Um, but some have been impacted in ways more severely than others, to the point where they have suffered huge trauma, and they're dealing with uh, the stresses and distress from having experienced um, things that were brought on by the pandemic. And being that we are still in the pandemic, many people are still dealing with the impact of this pandemic and having a really rough time uh, in trying to move forward. Okay. And so you have uh, pandemic post traumatic stress syndrome. And what that is again, uh, it's PTSD, a reaction, a response to the impact, the traumatic impact of the pandemic. And so you or someone you may know might be experiencing uh, pandemic PTSD right now and not be aware of it. Okay. I just want to go over quickly um, what are those symptoms. Now, the reason why um, there is a such thing as pandemic PTSD is because studies show that 80% of people who have recovered fully from COVID 19 um, experience uh, some symptoms of post traumatic stress and disorder. Okay. And so, and those symptoms are slightly different, um, but particular to um, the pandemic. Okay. And so I just want to share those symptoms with you now. People who experience pandemic PTSD experience the other common PTSD symptoms, but I'm going to read to you some symptoms that are particularly um, uh, specific to those who are experiencing pandemic PTSD. Okay. And those symptoms are, okay, Just trying to make sure I have all my notes together so that I can read it off to you. Okay. Those symptoms are um, having experienced um, having the virus, uh, the COVID-19. There is extreme anxiety and fear. Okay. Um, and extreme anxiety and fear of those things that they experienced during the pandemic that was traumatic for them, such as uh, experiencing having the virus or something else that was traumatic to them that's related to the pandemic in some kind of way or related to the virus. Maybe it was a loved one that um, uh, passed away from the virus. But whatever it is, it's uh, anxiety, extreme anxiety or distress or fear um, brought on by the thought or memory of something that was traumatic that happened to them during the pandemic or stemming from the impact of COVID-19. Okay, um, and so there is a fear of the fear of not being able to breathe. Um, Many people, when they were experiencing symptoms of having the virus, they had trouble breathing. And so, what people who are experiencing pandemic PTSD, um, they may have had the virus, and while they were um, having the virus, experiencing the virus, sick with the virus, they may have had times where they had difficulty breathing. And now, after they've fully recovered from the virus, they have a fear of not being able to breathe. So, um, if all of a sudden they have a sensation of uh, difficulty breathing, tightness in their chest, they become very, very distressed, anxious, fearful, um, because that's a memory. They remember of what it felt like when they were sick with the virus. Okay, so there's that fear of not being able to breathe. Um, there's another fear of um, going outside and reconnecting with people. Um, so someone who's have experiencing pandemic PTSD, they don't go outside. They don't. They remain uh, to themselves after having been quarantined or hospitalized for a period of time. Now that they've recovered from the virus, or um, the virus is no longer a threat to them. We're no longer sheltering in place. Um, these people that are experiencing pandemic PTSD, they continue to stay to themselves, stay indoors um, for fear of, uh, you know, uh, contracting the virus. Um, uh, again. So these people, you know, haven't been separated from others for a period of time. Now they become afraid to reconnect with others. So they stay to themselves. That's another symptom of pandemic PTSD. Another symptom of pandemic PTSD is um, the fear of uh, doing anything that would cause them to get sick again. Now, these people may have um, survived COVID and recovered fully. And now that they've recovered, they're fearful of catching it again. So they have they become anxious. So they of catching it again. So they do things to make sure that they are not in a position where they can possibly catch it again. So they would do things like stay in the house, not come in contact with uh, groups of people, not even family, because they want to make sure that they don't get sick again. They want to make sure that their exposure, the possible exposure to the virus, is very, very minimal, And so that's another symptom. Um, um, Another one is the fear of the not the fear, but guilt. These people experience guilt from having um, directly infected someone with the virus, or um, possibly harming someone uh, with the virus. Maybe they had contracted the virus, and because they contracted it and they were in close contact with a family member or a close friend, uh, and that family member or close friend winds up contracting the virus, and you know they recovered, but maybe they didn't recover 100%. So they have um, issues that they're still dealing with after having contracted the virus, and or someone close to them may have contracted the virus from them, and that person did not recover at all. So there's guilt there. Um, and so people who are experiencing pandemic PTSD are struggling with uh, the guilt of knowing that, oh, because of me, that person went through that with the virus, or um, you know because I had the virus, it caused this kind of uh, unfortunate event in that person's life. So there is a guilt of guilt stemming from either spreading the virus or causing um, harm to others um, from the virus, from that person having the virus. So um, there is guilt. Um, as I just stated, there is um, anxiety and fear of going, reconnecting with others. There's a fear, extreme fear of uh, contracting the virus again or getting sick again. Um, And so anything that would even um, remind them of how sick they were, or anything that would make them feel like, oh, um, I'm exposed, or I could possibly be re-exposed to the virus, they become very, very fearful of, anxious about, distressed even. And so that's how the pandemic PTSD, that's how it shows up. So if you know of someone, or it might even be yourself, that um, had a unfortunate experience with the virus, or may have survived the virus themselves, and you notice that, or it might be you, that there is a extreme avoidance of going outside and uh, reconnecting with others. You notice, or uh, in that person, or it might even be you, where you have overwhelming feelings of guilt, having uh, stemming from having caught the virus and recovering from it, but also um, you feel guilty about having spread the virus um, to close friends or family or something, and um, you know the impact of them catching the virus. You're guilty about that, or you feel guilty about that. Um, that's a symptom. Or if you are um, just paranoid about catching the virus again, or you know someone that maybe they didn't even catch the virus, but they are extremely paranoid, afraid of catching it, to the point where they, you know, are exhibiting symptoms of anxiety, overwhelming fear and distress, um, depression, um, you know, to the point where they don't want to do anything. It is disrupting their lives. Then you might want to have that person, or if it's you yourself, talk to someone, because you very well may have pandemic PTSD. Okay, so those are the things, and like I said, there's plenty of different treatments um, that can relieve your post-traumatic disorder symptoms, and you'll feel better. You will be able to regain uh, control over your uh, emotions, uh, over your mind, and be able to um, resume closer to normal life activities. Okay, and so yeah, feel free to reach out to me, or you can call uh, the telephone number for the National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Syndrome, Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. I, I'm reading, doing some research on some other things, and there's a couple of syndromes in my mind, and I keep, saying it. But that telephone number is 1-800 273 um, 273-8255. Again, you can call that number, or you can call me, or you can both of us, and you know, get to the help that is readily available. Okay. And so now what I'd like to do, I'm just checking over and making sure that I have all the information. I did tell you that there are apps available as well, um, amongst all of the other uh, treatments. Um, I went over what the definition is. It's yeah. Um, okay, so now what I'd like to do is just check uh, your to see if there are any questions or responses while I'm on the live here, and so I am just checking my laptop here so I can see who is here with us live. And who we have here today. Thank you so much for spending your Saturday evening with me and learning about post-traumatic stress disorder. June is traumatic stress disorder month. And on June 27th, that is post-traumatic stress disorder awareness day. Okay. And so I just want to, I guess I can bring this up. I was going to use my laptop, but I think I'm going to do my phone because I don't want to laptop here, because then I could see you and your responses, but you would not be to me, I think. Well, you know what? Let me see. You should be able to still see me. I mean, my laptop, it's a bit bulky. So what I'll do is I'll put over here on the side so that I can still see me, I can see you and responses, and it won't look too crazy. Okay, who do we have here? I'm seeing. Hello. Okay, I see Reverend Flo Changa Jeter is on, and she says, what difference between PTSD and anxiety attacks? Okay, excellent question. And anxiety is it comes and it goes. Right? Think what an anxiety attack is. You can have an anxiety attack, having post-traumatic stress disorder. You can have an anxiety attack of the ways that your PTSD shows itself. Okay, so for example, a panic attack, an anxiety attack is you overly fearful about something. You can it could be anything. The thing with post-traumatic stress disorder is that you can have a anxiety attack, um, something that triggered a memory about a traumatic event that happened to you. Okay, so anxiety attack can be uh, a reaction to something that makes you feel fearful. Okay, so you can have, for example, if you are afraid of uh, bees or what. My sister, she used to be terrified of bees and wasps. So when she saw a bee or wasp, she would take off running, okay? And like as if she could outrun uh, a bee or wasp, okay? Um, someone, someone having, someone can have, someone who is afraid of bees and wasps, upon seeing a bee or a wasp, can go into and have an anxiety attack. Okay. Um, and so they might, start hyperventilating, sweats, screaming, upon seeing the bee or the wasp. As long as they don't see the bee or the wasp, or the bee doesn't come really near them, they will not have an anxiety attack. You understand? The anxiety attack is directly related to their fear of bees and wasps. PTSD uh, is a reaction to not only something that is fearful, but something that causes trauma. Okay, an event happened to you where you may have been injured physically, or the had the experience of whatever it was, be it accident, near death experience, anything that would, it traumatized you. When you're traumatized, it's deep in fear. When you're traumatized, you don't have the ability to even escape. Sometimes when you're traumatized, some people freeze, because can't even understand or make sense of what's happening. They go into shock. So they don't know what to do. They just go into shock. They freeze and remain in the dangerous situation. There's someone else may have to come in and rescue them. So PTSD is in response. So is a response to trauma. Trauma is not. It's beyond fear. You're traumatized by something. Your mind doesn't really understand what is happening or why did it happen, and so your brain doesn't have an adequate response. It doesn't know what to do, so it just freezes or that's trauma. And even after the traumatic event is over and you're in safety, you survived the traumatic event, your brain still trying to remember what happened and keeps thinking about it over and over again. And your brain still, long after the traumatic event is over, the brain is still trying to make sense of that traumatic event in order to get close to it. So PTSD is different from an anxiety attack, because with an anxiety attack, you know what happened. Anxiety is not trauma. Trauma, a traumatic situation can lead to an anxiety attack happening, but the anxiety attack is not trauma. When you are experiencing an anxiety attack, that's you become extremely fearful, okay, of something or someone, but you know that you are afraid, and so you perceive the person, that thing, as being dangerous to you. So you become anxious, and then you try to flee from the situation. So your brain is fully aware of what's going on, and your brain perceives danger, and so you react as if you were in danger or about to be in a dangerous situation, and fear makes you move. Long after the whatever it was, the event happened, um, and you had a panic attack, your brain understands what happened. Your brain fully knows, okay, I saw that or that bee coming towards me, and I know that bees and hornets sting. I did not want to get stung, so I became afraid and tried to get out of the hornet sting. This is after the, the traumatic event. I mean, this is after the seeing the bee or the hornet or the wasp. You're, with a panic attack, your brain knows exactly what happened, what's going on, and your brain's response to seeing the bee or hornet or whatever it was is danger. I am fearful. Let me get out of harm's way. And in you getting out of or trying to get harm's way for whatever reason, you couldn't, or you did fear, you had more fear, and the fear took over you. So it was difficult for you to get from the bee to the hornet, developed a panic attack. Okay. But even after the panic attack passed, you calm down, the bee went, you calm down, you suffer trauma from the bee, from seeing the bee. The bee not sting you. You understand what I'm saying? So the PTSD is a response, a reaction to trauma. Anxiety or panic attack is a reaction to something that makes you feel fearful. Okay? Trauma is much more involved and intense. Okay. Because your brain continues to try to make sense of the situation, the traumatic situation that happened. Okay. Whereas in anxiety or panic attack, you know, or you perceive whatever happened, perceive that it was something you to be afraid of. Okay, so you are aware, and after the fearful situation is over, you are aware that okay, I am now in the safety inside of safety. There is no harm, there is no more threat to me, so I'm fine. And your brain has, and you can go back to your normal life's activity after having a panic anxiety attack. Once you have experienced trauma, a traumatic event, you don't go back to your regular life activity right away. Okay. Why? Because your brain is still processing, trying to understand and figure out what happened, why it happened, and how can I make sure it doesn't again. That's trauma. So the difference between PTSD and panic attack is that PTSD is a uh, fearful, intense distressful trauma or traumatic event, whereas a panic attack or anxiety, you become anxious um, uh, as a response to something that you perceive as dangerous to you, or something that causes you fear. Okay. But you know exactly what that thing is. Stand that thing to be something that you are afraid of. Okay. Whereas with PTSD, you're not even sure, you can't even make sense of what happened. So you didn't know if you should respond or react out of fear, out of anger, out of uh, anxious. Like, you didn't know what emotion to respond to the trauma with, because you didn't even understand that. So your response could have entailed all three of those emotions at the same time, but whatever your reaction was to that trauma, your brain, your body experienced shock, where you shut down. You was unable to even react because of shock. Panic attack does not uh, bring you shock. Trauma brings you shock. Okay, so that's the difference between those two. Did I answer your question? Uh, I think I did, but just let me know. Put it in the chat. Okay. And then Reverend Flo Cheetah, she writes again. Okay. What's the difference between? Oh, I read that already. Okay, yeah, I answered that question. Okay, then she wrote. Uh, oh, she said, "Got it." Okay, all right, good. She said, "Got it." Anxiety attacks is not trauma, but trauma can trigger anxiety attacks. Excellent. Yes, that's it. Okay. Thank you for that question. That was a great question. Okay, I see the love of my life. Mr. Kenneth Love is on and watching, and he says, "Hi, Boo, love you." All right, and then I see, oh, Reverend Flo Changajito. She posted my information. Thank you so much. That's awesome. And yeah, and so, all right, I think, whoa, really? Okay, there's more. Okay, it says, let more people see your posts. Okay, let me just see if I see everything and everyone here. Um, okay, all right, so, I don't see any more questions, but those are great ones. Um, and so, um, I'll, right after I end the live, I'm going to go back on and um, answer your comments and questions directly in the chat. Okay. But thank you for all of you all who gave, who put comments and questions in the chat. Um, and thank you for tuning in. Um, those that tune in every week, those that, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome, welcome. I do this on Saturdays uh, at 6 p.m. But I've been, just doing some different things, with the lighting and technical stuff. And so it's been taking me a little longer to uh, set up. And so I'm working on, getting my setup time, down to a science, so that you know everything goes out smoothly and succinctly. But um, one thing I've learned after doing this for a year and 2 months, is that every video is different. Every time I go live, it's different. It's different. And so here I am trying to, um, come up with a formula where, everything is 1, 2, 3 and in place. And, only thing I have to do is just get in front of the camera and talk. That's not the reality. Okay. There's always, every time, it's always something different. But I appreciate you all so much for tuning in and um, allowing me to share about post-traumatic stress disorder um, awareness. And so don't forget to like, share, comment this video, share it with someone that can really utilize the information. And thank you so much for spending time with me. I'll be, and being with me here on our Saturday Sanity chat program. Um, and so I will, that be all. I will sign off. Um, Stay tuned tomorrow. Uh, Tune in tomorrow, 1 p.m., where I'll be on again for our Mind of Christ series. And this month, we're going to be talking about, every Sunday this month, we're going to be talking about real men, real dads. And so tune in tomorrow at 1 and find out which real man, real dad we're going to be talking about. And the purpose for that is um, to look at fatherhood, um, and fatherhood tactics, different fatherhood tactics and skills, and um, you know, learn from the testimonies of various fathers, um, and either upgrade your daddy skills, or gain gain some different daddy skills, and so that's tomorrow at 1 p.m. And tell a friend, and I hope to see you there. Also, you can find me on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel at Dunamis Sound Mind Services on YouTube.com, and I have I have some videos there. I've launched already a new show called More Than Conquerors, and that uh, show will be only on YouTube, and we're going to be featuring videos where I'll be interviewing various guests, and they will be sharing with us um, their testimonies regarding victories that they have experienced in life, overcoming challenges, um, or they may be sharing an expertise or a new business. Last week, I had the wonderful pleasure of interviewing Miss Denise Evans, who is a community leader in the Fort Greene section of Brooklyn. She's also a parent coordinator at PS 287 here in Brooklyn, and we uh, had a nice conversation with her last week, and so you can find that video right there on YouTube channel. And that other videos. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Some of you I will see tomorrow, and others of you I'll see next week, Saturday. And so thank you once again. Take care. Good night. Bye-bye.